Today in America we produce a lot of food and we produce it pretty cheaply, but we're using a lot of chemicals to do it, a lot of water, a lot of energy. It takes a big toll on our environment, on the animals, on workers throughout the food system, and ultimately on our health.
Only 20% of the antibiotics sold in the USA today are used for humans. The rest, 80%, are used for livestock.
A CAFO is a concentrated animal feeding operation. They're like small cities, and they don't have waste treatment systems like human cities do.
There's thousands of animals. They're crowded in close to one another. They're oftentimes living in their own manure. There's just bacteria everywhere.
And that's part of the reason they're using antibiotics, because it helps compensate for the crowded, stressful, dirty conditions.
At some point in the 1950s, we discovered that if we fed antibiotics to farm animals day in and day out, they actually put on weight faster.
Which is a really poor use of these essential medicines.
Those antibiotics kill off the weak bacteria, but of course the strong survive and they multiply. And they actually get out of those CAFOs. They're able to escape into our environment.
For years, Washington regulators have been disturbed because beef cattle are given antibiotics in their feed. Dangerous to consumers, they say.
We're creating resistant organisms that may ultimately transfer that resistance to organisms that cause human disease.
They've known for nearly 40 years that this is a problem, and they have taken almost no meaningful action.
We could be going to an era when antibiotics don't work anymore.
Thanks to two landmark legal victories by NRDC, the FDA and the meat industry are finally under pressure to reduce antibiotics in livestock.
We won 2 decisions against FDA in 2012, and it was a great feeling. I remember the first lines I typed into the blog I wrote after the decisions came out, and it was, woohoo!
Even as the legal battle continues, NRDC is working outside the courtroom to transform the market.
What I've really focused on are the market-based strategies, building relationships with the companies that are in the marketplace buying antibiotic-free meat, having tremendous success marketing it to their consumers, and making a lot of money doing it.
You go to a place like Chipotle or Panera or buy meat from Applegate, and you're usually going to get meat produced without antibiotics, and it's not all that expensive.
And what NRDC is really trying to do is raise the floor for the entire industry. Consumers shouldn't have to bring a team of scientists or lawyers to the grocery store to try and figure out all of these labels. They should just not have bad choices.
Too often, farmers today are trying to treat the symptoms of weeds, of plant disease, of low yields, and they try to treat them with things like pesticides and chemical fertilizers.
A lot of it goes off into the atmosphere as greenhouse gases. The residues stay on our foods.
And they can make their way into our homes. A lot of people worry about the food they're giving their children.
Very early in my medical career, I was exposed to the notion that toxic chemicals could get into children and cause devastating damage to the brain that could last for decades. One very important thing that parents can do is they can buy organic food. Families who eat an organic diet have 90% lower levels of pesticides in their body. But the only way that parents are going to have an impact on societal uses of pesticides is to band together to join organizations like the NRDC who can magnify their voice.
NRDC helped write the law that regulates pesticides, and we've been helping enforce it since then. And it's been incredibly successful. We reduced lots of toxic chemicals in our food supply or eliminated some of them. For instance, 9 of the 12 worst organophosphates have been eliminated because of NRDC's advocacy. Now, that's a really big achievement.
I grew up on my family's farm. We've been farming in Nebraska for over 100 years, and my dad and my grandfather always taught me that it's really important to be a good steward of our natural resources because our family business depended on clean water and clean soil. In the 1970s, our Secretary of Agriculture encouraged farmers to plant fence row to fence row and to get big or get out. The emphasis was really on short-term profits, short-term yield increases, and that worked for a while, but it had real long-term implications for our farmers.
After decades of monoculture, farmland has lost much of its ability to nourish plants and retain water. When the recent record-breaking Midwest drought hit, farmers had lost their first line of defense, healthy soil.
In 2012, farmers lost $17.4 billion worth of crops.
These severe losses drove up food prices and threatened food shortages. Many farmers survived only with help from federal crop insurance, but that very program has reduced the incentive for farmers to care for their soil by guaranteeing reimbursement whenever crops fail. NRDC is working to reform the federal crop insurance program so that farmers pay lower premiums when they plant cover crops and take other steps to regenerate soil. Healthy soil is the key to sustainable agriculture.
Just increasing your organic matter in your soil by 1% can hold an additional 67,000 gallons of water. That's like your dry day fund if you're a farmer.
Today, we waste about 50% more food than we did in the 1970s. The average American household spends up to $2,200 per year on food that they ultimately don't eat. And as a country, that tallies up to about $160 billion worth of food.
Through her research at NRDC, Dana Gunders discovered that Americans waste nearly half of the food we produce. Her report, published by NRDC in 2012, attracted wide media coverage and put the problem of food waste on the map.
Here with survey findings, Dana Gunders, a scientist at the Natural Resources Defense Council.
A recent study, 90% of Americans have thrown out food.
A report released today, 160 billion pounds, about 40% of the food supply,
is dumped in the trash every year.
Food waste begins on the farm, where up to 30% of fruits and vegetables are never harvested because their color, shape, or size don't match narrow definitions of perfection. Waste continues in supermarkets, which cater to our yearning for abundance.
We all expect to walk into a supermarket and be able to buy anything we want at any time of day. And that means that they have to carry all of that inventory. Having those displays of abundant food in grocery stores actually leads to waste.
Another cause of waste is confusion about when food is no longer safe to eat, the result of a chaotic and unregulated food dating system.
Your use by, sell by, best by dates, those are generally not federally regulated, nor are they meant to tell you that your food has gone bad or that it's unsafe to eat. Most of those dates are just manufacturer suggestions for when the product is at its very freshest. The problem is that people think the dates are telling them to throw food out, and so they do. On top of that, we have a hunger problem right here in the US, and it's just a moral conundrum that we have food insecurity existing alongside such huge amounts of wasted food.
NRDC is now working across the food industry to standardize how dates are expressed and to educate people about making better use of what they buy.
I'm after a complete paradigm shift around how we think about food. I really believe that we can do it.
NRDC is helping remake our food system in nature's image.
People will come up to me and they'll be like, "Hey, I thought of you the other day. There were these rotten tomatoes." People are scared to eat at my house. They're scared to eat around me. They think I'm gonna serve them rotten food and, arrest them if they leave anything on their plate.